It's so bizarre. It's because I spent so long like studying guitar
Mhm.
and like, putting all this work into this thing. And then I like kind of just started writing songs as an accident, wrote a couple, and suddenly it's like, you're great. We love your voice. We love your songs. It's like, but I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I know what I'm doing I know what I'm doing here, but for some reason people don't care about that nearly as much.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm Adam, and very nice to meet you. And this is about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about the new album.
Perfect. Perfect.
Cool. So from what I was reading, were you born in Northampton, born and raised there?
Born and raised in Northampton, England. Yeah. I was born in a little village called Chapel Brampton, which was honestly quite a lovely place to grow up.
That's cool. How close are you to is it like are you close to a big city? I'm so unfamiliar. I'm from
Yeah,
the United
it's
States.
about
I know nothing.
an hour and a half north of London.
Okay, so not too
So
far.
we've got Birmingham, where everybody talks like that, and then we've got London, where everyone talks like that, and like we're kind of exactly halfway in the middle. Even the accent sounds like halfway in the middle.
Halfway in the middle. Very, very cool. So what about music? How did you get into music? Did you like come from a musical family? I believe you have a brother that's also in a band.
Yeah. Well, my dad was always in bands, and he plays guitar. So there's always guitars lying around the house. And I mean, no sort of professional musicians in our family, but yeah, we were always exposed to music from an early age. And yeah, me and my brother are both musicians. He's in a band called London Grammar, who are amazing.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's a funny one. I don't know how it happened really that we both ended up pursuing it, but yeah, we were exposed to good music from an early age, and my parents were supportive of our endeavors.
That's cool. How much younger is your brother than you?
2.5 years.
Oh, so you guys are fairly close. Would you play together growing up? Like, were you in bands ever
Oh
together?
yeah, man.
No.
We were in bands. Like we were both metalheads when we were younger.
Oh, really? That's
I
interesting
mean, to
from
be
what you're
honest,
doing now.
I'm still a metalhead. I listen to like Lamb of God, Mastodon,
Oh, wow.
like Meshuggah. Like that's my workout music.
Yeah, I was gonna say very, very different from what you're doing now.
Well, man, I think about this sometimes because like when you make an album, like when you make your first album, you can make anything. Like
Mhm.
I could have made my first album a metal album, but I didn't. But it's almost like as you go through it, it kind of shuts up all the doors. It's like if my third album had come out and it would have been like people would have been really weirded out by that. But if I'd have made it as my
Right.
first album, they would have just accepted it.
Sure. Well, I was gonna say there's still time to write a metal album.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
I'll do a side project.
you said your dad was a guitar player, played in bands growing up. Was it just like local kind of gigs, or would you go see him play at all?
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit young, but I mean, I used to fall asleep to them rehearsing and in the other end of the house,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and I couldn't hear anything except for the bass lines, and their bass player was killer. This guy called Aggie, and I still remember all those bass lines, man. It's funny because I didn't pick up the bass until quite late on when I started making my albums, and immediately felt like that's what I should have been doing the whole time. I feel like Aggie's bass lines just it osmosized into my brain whilst I was sleeping as a child.
That's amazing. Were they writing original music or doing mainly cover songs?
Yeah, yeah, they're a band. They were called Love in Exile.
Oh,
They
that's
got
rad. That's actually a cool name
they
too.
got some great songs, man.
That's awesome. Wow. So you'd hear him obviously growing up. And when he was the first instrument you learned guitar?
Yeah, I started playing guitar when I was 7, and I did the classical grades.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then when I was about 13, I got into metal, and I started like that's when I got really into guitar when I was about 13, and I started to practice a lot. I play every night, all night, and I was just shredding. It was like learning my tapping and
Oh,
my
sure.
shred chops. And then at about 16, 17, I saw a Martin Taylor he's a jazz guitar player. He did a solo concert, and blew my mind to smithereens. And I immediately knew that I needed to learn. I had no idea what he was doing, but I just knew that I needed to know what he was doing. So I got really into jazz and ended up doing like a jazz degree. And yeah, that's that. And conversely, during my sorry,
Oh, you're still there.
are you there?
Yeah.
During my jazz degree, you know, in jazz, there are jazz standards. So you're learning to improvise over the top of like Fly Me to the Moon or Autumn Leaves or Stella by Starlight, all these classic American songs from like the 30s and 40s. But I realized about a year into my studies that what really excited me and what I was really interested in was the songs themselves. So I started to write my own jazz standards. You know, I was like, well, what if I wrote like my own version of Come Fly With Me by Frank Sinatra? And that's really how I got into songwriting. And it's still there. If you listen to my songs, like a lot of my songwriting harks back to that era.
And were you, I mean, at that point you were just writing guitar parts, or were you writing like, because lyrics and your voice and everything that come in around that same time as well, or were you always like chorus, choir, anything like
happened. Yeah, it happened at the same time. I was about 22 is when I moved to London, and I'd always loved writing as a kid, and I actually like thought maybe I would be a writer. And it was like when I started writing songs, the thing that is magical for me about songwriting is the relationship that the words have with the music. So, you know, if you say a lyrical phrase with a certain chord underneath it, or you change that chord, like at the end of my album, there's a lyric that says, and the hurt that I feel will remind me of you. And I like, you know, I change the chord that keeps repeating. That time it's a minor chord, and it just makes it really sad. And like that is like a game to me, and I love experimenting with that kind of stuff. Or you know, even like Columbo, where it says like something about the setting sun, and I do these like BVs that like go wow wow wow.
Yeah.
It's like that's the setting sun, and I mean, it's kind of nerdy, but I just, you know, I really get off on that stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. I have to I was just listening to Columbo right before I got on this call with you, and I want to go back and kind of hear how you do that. That's really fascinating, kind of making the music speak to the lyrics in that way.
Dude, there are so many Easter eggs in my music. Like in Tears and Rain, it's like all the little things that will be lost, like Tears and Rain, and like I've got the raindrops in the synths, and they're like slowly disappearing. And like I've got like that song's about my grandmother dying, and at the end I've got the church bells on the piano, and like I love making like musical metaphors.
That's so cool. Yeah, now I'm gonna have to dive back in and try to see if I can find some of those little Easter eggs. That's really cool. I did radio and stuff for a long time in interviews, but I always was fascinated with video editing, and it's kind of, it reminds me of like you hear the voiceover, whatever it's talking about, and you got to find the elements that kind of match what it's doing, but you're doing it all through, you know, music and audio. Cool. So you started at 22 is when you started writing songs?
Yeah, man, I hadn't written a song or sung at all before 22. But as I said, I'd been studying like jazz as a world.
We're familiar with, obviously, with,
you know,
theory and everything.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think there's a better way to learn to write songs than studying Jerome Kern and Cole Porter and Roger and Hammerstein and like George Gershwin, like all of those guys. And I was really familiar with the you know, functional harmony, the movement of the way that those chords run, and I think to a certain extent I'd osmosized those lyrics. So yeah, I say I started writing at 22, but I was definitely learning to some extent before that.
Sure. And when you started doing that, or putting out your own songs or writing your own songs, was it something that like how did it begin? Were you just doing it and showing it to people, or did you try to put something online, or like how did
originally
I guess
I didn't really intend on being being an artist. I thought maybe I wanted to be a songwriter, you know, like Jerome Kern.
Writing for other people in the sense. Okay.
and then I basically I'd write a song, and then as soon as it was finished, I'd just do a live performance recorded on my iPhone, and then I'd upload it to SoundCloud. And I very quickly got, at the same time I was going around like acoustic nights in London, you know, performing and stuff. But yeah, I very quickly got emails coming in from publishers being like, "We love you, your songs, and also who's the guy singing in the demos?" And I was like, "Well, it's me. I'm sorry, I didn't have anyone to sing it." And they're like, "No, we love your voice."
That's awesome.
So then, you know, then the next thing I know, I'm flying over to America and signing a record deal with like Virgin Records, and I was like, this definitely wasn't meant to happen, but cool, I guess.
Wow, that's huge. I mean, could you like, that must have been such a big moment to be like, not only does a major label want you, but you're coming out to the United States and we're getting courted that way. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. It's because I spent so long like studying guitar and like, you know, putting all this work into this thing, and then I like kind of just started writing songs as an accident, wrote a couple, and suddenly it's like, "You're great, we love your voice, we love your songs." It was like, but I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I like I know what I'm doing here, but for some reason people don't care about that nearly as much.
Yeah. Wow. So okay, when you get signed, is like, are they having you put an album out? I know you had the live EP, and was that around that same time, or was that prior to?
Well, it was funny because I had all these record labels being like, "You're amazing, we love you," but most of them were like, "You're amazing, we love you. You should sound like Ed Sheeran. You're amazing, we love you. You should sound like David Gray. You're amazing, we love you. You should sound like Jack White." And Virgin Records were like, "You're amazing, we love you. Here's a check." And so I signed with them.
Makes sense.
And on the condition that they weren't allowed to hear the music and the album until it was ready. I didn't want them like hanging out in the studio and telling me to turn the snare drum up. I just couldn't be bothered. Anyway, so I did the album. Awesome. We had like Pino Palladino on the bass. We had Jason Rebello on the keys. I had Jeremy Stacey on the drums. It was produced by Ethan Johns. It was like in Real World Studio and Peter Gabriel Studio. I had like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on this thing. I had a personal chef who was making us pies with our initials on them. Anyway, I'm not in the words of Alex Jones, I'm not bragging, but the point I'm telling you this is because it was so ridiculous. And then at the end of the whole thing, I handed them the album, and they were like, "This is fucking shit."
Oh my gosh.
And they dropped me. Sorry, I'm not allowed to swear.
Oh no, you can swear.
Cool. They were like, "This is." They said, "Quote, this is unreleasable." And then I was signed to them for 6 months, and then they dropped me. I came back to the UK with no money, no self-esteem, and also no album, because you know they took it and said you can have it back if you pay us back the $300,000 or whatever it is they spent on it. And I was like, as it happens, I don't have $300,000, guys. So
you're like, well, that's yours, I guess.
But so hilariously, I spent what was left of my record deal advance. I bought a laptop and a microphone, which was this one, which is, by the way, the best mic ever. It's a SM7B by
that's
Shure.
What I have.
400, unbelievable. They're 400 quid. You can put them in your backpack and they're invincible. Michael Jackson recorded Thriller on them.
Oh, anyway, I didn't know that. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. You can record everything with them. But anyway, I had that, and I recorded the entire album with Pharaoh, Finley Robson, who still produces all my stuff now. And we did it on a budget of zero. And we self-released it with a marketing budget of £6,000, which I borrowed from my manager. And the lead single went gold in America.
That's amazing. Is that you wrote like a song a month or something like that?
I recorded and released a song every month for 1 year. And at the end of it, I put it out as an album. It was called A Song for Every Moon. And that's about how my career started, really.
Oh my gosh. I mean, to see the success of that song going gold and everything else with it, that must have been such a huge, like, obviously a huge validation to be like, oh, they should have put my record out, obviously. Like
well, in their defense, I don't think the stuff that I did when I was there was as good.
Okay.
You know, what's special about that album is you can hear that it was done in my kitchen with one microphone. And it's not like, you know, people always ask me at the time, I was like, how did you make that lo-fi sound? I was like, bro, that's as hi-fi as I could get. It was really not a stylistic decision. It was just a process of limitations. But it's got an intimacy to it. It's got a rawness to it. And you can hear my like iPhone ringing in easily. And you can hear like the shuffling around in the room, and you can hear the bad mixing because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And it feels real, and I really meant it, and it feels like mine. And whether or not, you know, I'm sure the album I made with Virgin was like better in whatever way, but it didn't make people feel in the way that A Song for Every Moon did. And I think as much as I learned a great deal from making an album with Ethan Johns, and I did learn a great deal because he's a great producer, I learned just as much from the process of making it myself, and understanding that people don't care whether you've used a £10,000 Neumann or not, as long as it makes them feel something.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's being even more like seen nowadays, especially with like, you know, social media and TikTok and these things where you'll hear a song go viral there that was recorded on like a, you know, $10 USB mic in their closet, and then it, you know, blows up that way. And
no offense to all the studio engineers out there.
No, for sure. But it's just interesting how that is. And I've even had other artists say that when they're recording a demo, especially during COVID and stuff, not having the access to the studio, they'd record a demo or a vocal take, and then going back to a bigger studio and trying to like regurgitate that same emotion on the song. It just wasn't there, and they ended up using that original version.
Oh yeah, all the time, man, all the time. I generally find there's something very special about the first time you do anything, and trying to recreate that is normally an impossibility.
Yeah, 100%. And then you did another record up until COVID, right? You were going to release it, and then that all stopped, obviously, probably.
Yeah, and then we did To Let a Good Thing Die, which came out in 2020, which actually came out like just as the pandemic hit, and all the touring was cancelled, and you know, it was a strange release. In some ways, this album I'm releasing now is the first time I've ever released an album in the traditional way. The first one was A Song for Every Moon, which was that weird song a month thing, and the second one came out during lockdown. So I've never had some singles coming out and then the album and a big tour. Like, I'm so excited about doing something extremely normal. Well, as normal as you can call releasing an album, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that album I'm super proud of, and like we had this mad TikTok moment with the lead single Nothing, which went viral, and I think it was like, you know, the top 10 most listened to piece of music on TikTok at one point, and that's brought my music to a whole new audience. You know, it ended up on like SNL, and Billie Eilish did it on SNL and stuff, and
yeah, it's
I don't know, it was just a really mad moment. Showed me the power of virility, and yeah, it was pretty cool, really.
Yeah. And you have Phineas, is he on this? He co-wrote something, or he's on your new record too, right?
No, he did The Most Beautiful Thing, which was a single off of the second album.
The previous album. Sorry, I'm getting confused on myself. So wow, I mean, that's huge to hear that she's gonna do not only a song but on SNL, which is like, you know, so many people paying attention, and I mean, that must have been insane.
Well, it was insane, but hilariously, it also showed you like how much more powerful new media is, because the TikTok thing changed my life, really. It like doubled my streaming numbers and brought my whole catalog to a whole new audience of different people. Whereas SNL, you know, so yeah, I got like 100 tweets. No disrespect to SNL. I don't want to badmouth SNL. Like, I want to play you. If you would like me to play you, I will play.
right. But it is interesting how that is, right? I mean, the amount of eyes and ears you have as far when it comes to social media versus cable television. But anyway, so it's been 3 years since that album. Has this record been, or this new album been, you know, tell me, when did you start working on this one?
So this one, basically, as soon as the lockdown ended, to be honest with you, I lost my marbles a little bit during the lockdown, as I'm sure a lot of us did. and I found it very difficult to do anything creative. I felt like a plant that was kept in the dark with no sunlight. So I didn't write anything for a year, basically.
Wow.
And then as soon as the lockdown, like the travel bans was lifted, I went to on the first plane to America and landed in Los Angeles, and I bought this vintage Mercedes 1981 SL, which is an ivory white, like shabby brown leather interior, which I love very much. And I spent 6 months just driving around and basically just saying yes to everything. You know, I went to all the parties, I fell in love with everyone, I caused absolute chaos and carnage and like had a full meltdown. But it was like I was so starved of life, so starved of experience, and I just felt like, oh my God, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And it was an amazing time. And probably the most prolific period of songwriting I've had. I wrote the whole album in about 6 months.
Really? Wow. And were you
Yeah,
writing based on those experiences that you're having
yeah,
in the Los
100%,
Angeles area?
man, 100%. And then yeah, just flew back to England and spent about a year recording it in this room.
Oh, no way. So
Um,
you did it yourself again? Like similar to the first album?
yeah, I did it all with Pharaoh, the same producer that I've done all of my albums with.
Uh-huh.
We literally lived in this room. We actually had a bed on the floor just there.
Oh,
It was called
wow.
the Slug Nest.
So, well, oh, that's great. So you wrote the album when you were in LA, and then when you got back, you recorded the whole thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And when it came to this album, I mean, how you said earlier, this is kind of really your first proper, put the singles out and then put the album out and then
Mm.
do the tour. Like going into it, did you approach it any differently than those first two albums? Like kind of knowing like, well, hopefully everything will stay open and it's going to be
Eh,
similar to a regular record.
Not really, but it felt different just because it was my third album. I think your first album, you feel like it's very special because you're totally green. No one is listening or waiting for it, and you've got a whole lifetime of experiences to bank on, and as much time as you want to make it. So it's like a unique thing. The first album, second album, traditionally harder. You have a fan base, you have pressure, you have time constraints. You're touring, and you probably developed like ego complexes and all of this stuff that you've got from becoming an artist. And it's like then you have to try and channel that all into the second album. The third album was the first time I felt like really relaxed about it, and I was really confident that I could do something really special. And it's the first, and it is actually the first album that like I think fully represents my capabilities as a musician. Like I feel like everything I've worked towards my whole life is in a way been leading up to this thing, which is Columbo, the third album.
Wow. And do you feel like when you say that, is there certain things that you're able to implement in the album that you hadn't before, like different instruments or different arrangements?
Yeah, it really like just like trying to say what you really mean is the hardest thing, which sounds really dumb. But it's so hard to find your voice as an artist, and it's so hard to let go of insecurities and inhibitions and speak honestly. Um, and I feel like to a certain extent with the other two albums, there was still a little bit of like trying to sound like this or trying to be cool or trying to appease to this demographic or like making sure I didn't sound like this person or making sure I did sound like this person. I don't know. With this album, I just didn't give a fuck, and like I just made it, and it came out in a beautiful flowing way. And I think also because of COVID, it forced all of us to go back to the place where we began. You know, I literally went to my parents' house, lived there for a year, and it was like, well, okay, if I'm not touring around the world and I'm not the like successful musician who's like standing on the stage and everyone's going yay all the time, like who the fuck am I? You know? And like I wrote this album from the perspective of that realization. And I think it's a really special thing that wouldn't have happened without COVID. And in a lot of ways, I'm really grateful for that kind of artistic perspective that lockdown gave me.
Mhm. Was it difficult? I mean, having that approach, I mean, was it difficult to be vulnerable or was that something that just kind of came naturally as
Not,
okay, I don't really care anymore. Like, let's just, like you were just kind of
yeah,
saying.
not at all. I mean, I've written about stuff I would never have had the courage to write about before, like my own mental health. I wrote about family friends that committed suicide when I was 16, which was like this really life-changing event for me. And, it's like 17 years later or whatever, I finally had the courage to write about this experience. I wrote about my grandmother passing. I wrote about falling in love. There's a lot of stuff, but it's all like stuff that I really feel and I really think.
Mhm. And when putting those songs out, like, I mean, so the first couple that you've put out two thus far, right? To Let a Good Thing Die, and then Columbo, or the couple that you've released from the album thus far.
No, To Let a Good Thing Die is my second album.
Oh, okay, sorry. Oh, I'm thinking of the wrong thing.
Yeah.
We
So
were
the two
never
singles
really
are
friends.
We
is
Were
the
Never Really
song.
Friends.
Yeah, we were never really
Yeah,
friends.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting so confused
All good, all
this
good.
morning. I don't know what the hell's going on with me. We were when We Were Never Really Friends, and Columbo, were either of those ones that you were kind of vulnerable about talking about or releasing?
Yeah, I mean, my friend Jimmy Nates once told me, if you're afraid to say it, it's probably the right line. And I definitely felt that with some of the songs here. I mean, We Were Never Really Friends is a story of the relationship that I was in during the writing period. And Columbo is about the car.
Oh,
Columbo's about,
sure, the Mercedes.
yeah, I mean, it's a love song about the car because I ended up crashing it, unfortunately. And it was like this kind of tragic event, but the car felt like a symbol of the period. It felt like a metaphorical manifestation of renewed autonomy. And in that way, that's why I decided to name the album after it.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. I mean, it's not amazing you crashed a car, but that's quite the story to
Yeah,
like have along with it.
yeah.
Okay, well, the album's coming out fairly soon, and then you're doing this big tour to support it. I mean, that must feel really good, obviously, with your other tour getting canceled, and then now kind of
Yeah,
having
man.
this proper.
Absolutely. Album comes out in July. Tours starting world tour, which is my first world tour, which is wild, is in August. And it's going to have been 3 years since I stood on a stage. So fingers crossed I remember how to do it.
I'm sure you'll be good to go. Are there any cities that you haven't played or or never been to, or maybe that you really are excited about?
I don't know if we're going anywhere for the first time. I mean, I did pretty extensive touring with the first album, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just a bigger production, like the first time I went to Australia, it was just me and a guitar. Whereas this time we're going with like the full crew and my band, and it's going to be bigger venues, and yeah, man, can't wait.
Exciting. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for doing this, Bruno.
Dude, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I have one more quick question before I let you go. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Advice for aspiring artists. I think that there's a bit of a misnomer with the idea of an aspiring artist. You either are an artist or you're not an artist. Don't aspire to be an artist, because an artist is not defined by having a successful album or going on tour or having a big house. Like, being an artist is you feeling a certain way about the world and expressing yourself through whatever artistic medium you feel most capable in, whether it's painting or making music or sculpture or dance or whatever. So yeah, just believe that you are an artist and create something that you're proud of and that is an honest reflection of your feelings. And that is my advice.